Hi, Sheena.
Hi, Cleo.
How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. And how are you doing today?
Good, really well. I think I say this every time, but I can't believe it's March.
Oh,
It's gone so quickly. March going into April. It's the first tomorrow.
it will be April Fool's tomorrow.
Goodness me.
So we'll have to cause a bit of chaos out there, I think.
That's it. Cause a bit of chaos.
Yeah.
And then by the afternoon, chill down. Oh,
Oh,
no, good to see you.
yeah, it's great to see yourself again as well.
Lovely, lovely. So we were going to look at a couple of things that could be relevant, especially with the clocks going forwards,
Yeah.
and just in general, because even this week, speaking to people, just in general, seem to think that having 3 or 4 hours sleep a night is just normal. You know,
Mm, mm,
so many people just, oh yeah, I'm working like 18 hours, or I've got 3 jobs.
yeah.
Uh, I've got so much going on. I don't sleep. That's just the norm. And every
Uh,
time I hear it, I feel like the hairs stand up. Back up. So I just think, how are you coping?
yeah, completely. The impact that that must have on people's functioning must be quite intense.
Because I think a lot of it. Can't remember the gentleman's name. He's like a marketer on LinkedIn. Oh,
Mm,
Gary V. And he did something on his profile, probably the end of last year,
yeah.
talking about um, being busy all the time, even though obviously we live busy lives. That is the way
Mm, mm,
we live now.
mm.
Not caring for yourself, I suppose. That's the
Yeah.
thing. If you're not caring for yourself, being busy isn't a
Mm.
way to combat that, I
Mm.
suppose. Like, it's good to be busy, it's good to have lots going on, but only if you're enjoying it, first of all,
Yeah,
and you are looking after yourself.
yeah, that's right,
Mm,
isn't it? And also considering that balance between that busy sort of lifestyle and what you might do to balance that out as well.
mhm, mhm, absolutely. So, yeah, how would you I was put it on you. Yeah, so what would you kind of say? So sleep can affect, or a lack of sleep can affect your mental health, can't it? In a
Yeah,
big way?
absolutely. I think there's kind of like, there is like emerging evidence as well, and research that is kind of being conducted to further look at the links between sleep and mental health, because there are kind of measurable brain and body changes that occur during sleep, and I can explain a little bit more about that with REM and non-REM sleep. But if we think about kind of the quality of sleep that we get, it's crucial for our mental health, because we know that if we're not getting enough sleep, or if the quality of sleep isn't great for a number of reasons, that can possibly exacerbate any existing mental health difficulties that people may struggle with as well.
Mm, yeah, yeah, no, which makes sense.
Mm, mm. Because it has, it's not, it's kind of about our functioning as well, isn't it? Our brain functioning, as we know that when we don't sleep well, we're more groggy, we're more tired, more exhausted, more irritable, we can't
Mm,
focus, we can't concentrate, and if you think about somebody who's already kind of maybe struggling with symptoms of mood or anxiety, that's perhaps going to be made worse by a lack of sleep. Um,
mhm,
and there are a number of factors which can contribute to a lack of sleep, and that might be, pain, it might be medical conditions that people have, it might be worrying, it
mhm,
might be environmental factors. So there's a lot of kind of factors there when we consider sleep.
mm. And do you think that, well, obviously that's, I was gonna say, but it's quite a large scope. So I was gonna say for some people, the idea that sleep isn't as important, like, I suppose for me, I
Yeah.
always feel like, well, everybody knows that. It's a similar thing of saying, well, everybody knows that you're supposed to include veg in your diet, for instance, or fruit and veg. But
Mm,
actually, the reality of the situation is, some people might just think that's a bit of,
mm,
things that people say, and it doesn't really matter. So similar to sleep, it's almost like, but I
yeah,
go to bed, sleep for the 3 hours, and I get
yeah,
up, and and they're not relating the issues they might be having with the
absolutely.
lack of sleep.
Yeah, definitely. And the long-term effects of that as well, perhaps, because actually, how long is that sustainable for? How long can that lack of sleep be sustained? And also the messages, like you're saying there about sleep, in the sense of, oh, well, I only need 3 or 4 hours. I can function with 3 or 4 hours sleep. You might be able to function, but are you functioning to your optimal level, or are you functioning at just this kind of level that is you're just getting through the day, um, really.
Yeah, I've just as you were saying that, when you said the optimal level, and this was years ago,
Mm.
we went on holiday, we were in, Napa. Well, but it was in
Okay.
the quiet season. I wasn't partying and clubbing. So it was, we went out of season just before, the
Yeah.
party started,
Mm,
and we were in a lovely hotel, and the staff were fantastic, and there was this
mm,
young lady who worked behind the bar.
mm.
And, I just remember one of her colleagues coming over, and he had, like, a crate of Red Bull. He
Yeah.
said, "There you go." He'd gone to the shop and he bought, and I laughed thinking it was for the actual bar. And she said, "Oh, no, no, that's my." I said, "Do you drink that much Red Bull?"
Yeah.
And we were having this conversation where she was saying that because she was from the UK,
Mm,
but things could be hard. She was quite strapped, you had to do a few jobs to get
mm.
by to be
Yeah.
able to live there. So she would drink Red Bull because it helped her stay on the go.
Mm, mm.
Having this conversation, I remember thinking, that sounds like an absolute nightmare, like, to have to drink Red Bull, to stay awake. A
Yeah.
couple of days later, she passed out at the bar. I had to call the ambulance. And I remember thinking, is that, like, I don't
Mm,
know, I never got the chance to speak to her, but
mm.
I wonder if, some people might not make that connection of,
Yeah.
I'm feeling, because it can bring on physical illnesses,
Yeah.
not just, do people make that connection? And I suppose if you're somebody who's always done that,
Yeah.
maybe that connection just doesn't, you
Mm,
don't put those things together. I'm feeling
mm.
stressed, depressed, fed up, ill. My digestive system's not working, and
That's
they're not
right.
realizing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so correct, isn't it? Because actually, as you talk about that, it brings to mind a client I worked with some years ago, and like with the presenting difficulties were panic attacks and anxiety.
Mm,
And, obviously maintaining anonymity here, she was describing that she was on numerous prescribed medications for her symptoms of anxiety and panic. And I asked her, can you tell me what your sleep is like? And
mhm.
can you tell me, I always ask people how much caffeine, drugs, alcohol intake, because it's a really, really important part of trying to understand, what's going on for them. Um,
Mhm.
20 cups of coffee a day, 20. And
Wow.
so part of and we know that obviously you're thinking about caffeine, what's it doing to heart rate? If there's already pre-existing kind of anxiety panic attacks there, it's going to be exacerbating the panic attacks. So we had to really kind of think about how to reduce the caffeine intake as part of the work that we were doing to manage the anxiety and the panic as well. And I think you're right, it just highlights that people aren't always aware of the impact that these energy drinks, you look at these energy drinks that are kind of in every single shop. There was that craze, wasn't there, about the Prime drink?
Yeah.
And, you know, you've got these monster drinks and people are just drinking them without realizing. And there's a link between that as well and perhaps they're not getting enough sleep, um,
Mhm.
using it as a little bit of a pick me up. Um,
Yeah.
so there is definitely something there, I think, in what you're saying about how does this all link together.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe it's just about, like you said, there's things that you can ask,
Mm,
um, like you say, that will might be glaringly obvious because you and I will know, oh, that's a bit of a red flag. But
yeah,
maybe when you're in a situation, they say that if you're feeling stressed, you probably do not see the wood for the trees.
of
So you're not
course.
those, you know.
Yeah, because people will use what they can to help them at the time. That's what as human beings we're going to do, aren't we? We'll look at, right, what do I need to do to get me through the day? What's going to help me here? And it is really important to get that bigger picture. You know, I always ask about sleep when I'm working with clients, always. Um, because if we can try to do some work within the work that we do to improve quality of sleep in whatever way we can, um, most of the time, I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
You know, I'm not saying that's the only factor because, you know, it's not easy to sometimes sleep. People will often say as well, I've never been a good sleeper, or
yeah.
it's been like this for years, and I'm like, right, we're still going to do something with it because
Can still change
yeah,
still.
definitely, definitely. And then when you explain to them, you know, about sleep and the importance of it, I think sometimes it can be quite eye-opening for people.
Yeah, for them to notice these things. But like you say, it must be a really nice feeling if somebody's having these sleep issues,
Yeah,
and then somebody straight away can point out
yeah,
A, B, C. Let's try this for a while and see how you go, and that must feel like heaven,
yeah.
because to get more
Mm.
sleep.
Absolutely, because how much better if we think about like our own sleep? I know I very much value my sleep and I like to, even though it might be broken at times, well, it's often broken, but I will like to get about 9 hours.
Mm.
That's a
Yeah,
long time,
absolutely.
but I like
No, no.
to go to sleep early and then feel like I'm more refreshed. But there is something about the quality rather than the quantity because it
Yeah,
varies for everybody in terms of how much sleep um, you need. Generally, for older adults, they tend to need less sleep because things change over a period of years. Um,
yeah,
but it is so different for everybody and their circumstances and what's happening for them.
yeah, yeah, and there are all sorts of things like, so if you're away on holiday and then you
Mm.
come back, it could be, the jet lag, like
Yeah.
you say, stressful times. I mean, I've always been known to, you know, my whole life really, apart from one section of my life, and
Mm.
that was when I was going through bereavement. But
Yeah.
so as I hit I've gone back to that now, but yeah,
Mm.
I hit the pillow, I'm out for the count.
Yeah.
I always just took that for granted, so that
Mm.
when this started to happen where I couldn't sleep and I wasn't sleeping, I was overly stressed. I actually used to have the shakes the next
Yeah.
day. It was such a shock to my system and, oh, it was awful, and like you say, it adds to
Mm.
everything else that's going on, you know? Um,
Lovely.
it's a bit scary. Like, if you're not used to it, it can be
Mm.
scary, but if you're like you say, if you've been going through that for years,
Yeah,
that will just feel like, well, this is life, and
that's
getting
it.
something like 8 hours sleep, that might be shocking.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, that's so true, isn't it? Is, you know, that kind of contrast of somebody who has had very little sleep for a number of years, but then they get a better night's sleep and it's like, wow, you know, feels so different. But that must have been a really difficult time to kind of, you know,
Yeah.
not sleep well.
It was awful. I could not believe, I was thinking,
Mm.
but what I've just said earlier about not connecting the dots, I did not put it down to the grief. I
Yeah.
thought there's something else going on.
Mm.
Why can't I sleep? And obviously, the worst thing is preparing to go to bed, saying
Mm.
to yourself, "Oh God, I wonder if I'm gonna sleep tonight." That is the start of the problem
Yeah,
because then you start to worry, then you start to stress, you go
yeah,
into bed, tossing and turning,
that's it.
and yeah, yeah. And one
Yeah.
of the reasons why
Mm.
something I wanted to work on because
Mm.
every time somebody tells me they're lacking in sleep, I just takes me back to that awful time. Mm,
Yeah, and sometimes reflecting on your own experiences like you did there can be helpful as well, can't it? To think about what can I do to help somebody or support
mm,
someone that might be in this situation. Because there'd always be so
mm,
many different factors, weren't there, that would be contributing to kind of like the sleep pattern or sleep hygiene. We refer to it as a clinical term. For sleep is kind of like, your sleep hygiene. Um, but it can be so complex.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because even things I used to also it didn't so things like, coffee,
Mm.
tea, um, actually don't literally, before all of that, I could drink a cup of coffee before bed and be off to sleep
Yeah,
because coffee and, stimulants don't actually stimulate me at all. So,
yeah,
when people will say, like, if you're studying and they say you're gonna cram the night
yeah,
before,
yeah.
um, that's never worked for me. My
Mm.
body say bedtime,
Yeah,
and I'll have to go to bed because 'cause I'll just fall asleep.
yeah,
Um, so, yeah, I think that I stuck kind of to that clock until, the hard time, but, yeah, I think it's
mm,
if you don't know,
yeah,
that's something you can slowly, gradually
mm,
fall into those, patterns and then
definitely.
yeah, make it up. I've had no sleep all week 'cause I'm that busy,
Yeah.
and then I'll make up for it at the weekend
Mm, mm.
that way.
Yeah,
Uh,
it creates just another problem, doesn't it? It looks at you're creating another problem because you're trying to kind of catch up. But then again, the next week is going to be difficult as well because you maybe had too much sleep, didn't need
mm,
that much sleep, and then you're back in that unhelpful sleep cycle again.
yeah, 'cause even, too much sleep can be just as debilitating as not enough, if
Absolutely.
too much
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah,
Mm,
often, have a lot of people, particularly clients that've got symptoms of depression in low mood will oversleep. So sometimes sleeping will be an escape because they don't
yeah,
want to be awake. Because it's too difficult to be awake because of that's part of the symptoms of their low mood. So they'll
mhm,
be often oversleeping, or using that to just get away from the world and their mind and the thought process and everything that may be going on for them.
which is
Mm.
yeah, kind of it it makes sense that that would feel like the escape because I suppose
Yeah.
it's the best place that you would feel safe in your
Yeah,
home,
that's it.
bed.
Thing about the
Yeah,
safety there as well, you're right, is feel safer when I sleep. I don't feel anxious when I sleep, or, people aren't saying things to me when I'm sleeping, or they're not, whatever might be going on in their lives, because they're shutting off from it. But we know that it's not healthy because again, it's not something that is going to be sustainable in the long term or good for mental health in the long term.
yeah, yeah, no, totally, that makes sense. And so you mentioned about the, sleep stages, which
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about the sleep stages. So if we think about kind of like how sleep is divided, it's divided into two parts. So we have what we call the REM sleep, which is your rapid eye movement sleep, and then your non-rapid eye movement sleep, so your non-REM sleep. So REM sleep is described, yeah, as the period of where you're dreaming. Okay, so that's where a lot of intense brain activity is occurring, and it's called REM, or rapid eye movement, because our eyeballs are actively moving under our lids during this time. And it's interesting because as an EMDR therapist, we replicate that when we do EMDR. So I use that for kind of that's what happens in an EMDR session is we're replicating
oh,
REM. Yeah.
really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Then you have got like your non-REM sleep, which is, so that's the period of restful sleep that you'll have. And there's 4 stages of that. So
Mm.
as we kind of move through those sleep stages, the body becomes more relaxed, and our bodily functions also slow down. So such as your heartbeat slows down, and by stage 4, there's a sense of relaxation. Um, so when a person goes through all of those non-REM stages, they then begin the REM sleep stage. So that's when the dreams are occurring, and that lasts around 20 minutes. So after that REM stage, the person will start over again with stage 2 and go through the non-REM stages of sleep again. The sleep cycle is then completed when the person has gone through all of the sleep stages. So generally, kind of on average, someone will experience around 4 to 5 complete cycles of the non-REM and the REM sleep in a night, ideally. Um, so just to kind of go into the stages a little bit more. Stage 1 is like your light sleep. So that's where your eye movements are slower, and there's some muscle activity. Your breathing and your pulse becomes more even during that stage. And there might be some vivid imagery that might occur as well, and some sensations of perhaps like floating, and some muscle contractions perhaps. Then we have stage 2. That's when your eye movements stop, during this stage, and your brain waves and the body functions tend to slow down, in that stage as well. And now, if the eyelids were open during that stage of sleep, the person would not be able to see at that point in time. Then we have like the stages 3 and 4, which are kind of like your deep sleep stages. So during that time, people won't easily wake up, and there's not much kind of eye movement or muscle activity that takes place in that period, in that stage. And that is a stage that actually is really, really important for restoration and us feeling kind of, restored and repair. Then stage 5 of the REM sleep. In that stage, what's happening is your heart rate, your eye movement, and your breathing rate will increase. And that's really important, this stage, for what we call like the memory consolidation, and psychological well-being. So most dreams will occur during that period as well of REM sleep. And those sleep cycles are repeated like throughout the night. And on average, a cycle of that sleep will take around 90 minutes. Now, linked to this kind of like, say, PTSD, for example,
Mm.
some studies have shown that some people that have been diagnosed with PTSD may not experience these sleep cycles normally, for use of a better word, because traumatic nightmares may actually interrupt that sleep pattern, which is why people with PTSD may struggle with their sleep. So they might reach the REM part of sleep more quickly, but the duration of it may be shorter and it may be less effective as well. So there's a lot there when you actually like look into sleep and think about sleep and try to understand it, of how important it is and what goes on in all of those stages, really.
It is. I think it's one of the most fascinating topics,
Mm,
because that whole idea, like you're saying, of escaping for some people, it's almost like let me get away from the world. And I know now if I've had a really good, well, most nights have a really good night's sleep.
yeah,
I actually look forward to bed. I like my routine before
yeah,
bed. I'm just
mm,
I love it. And then
yeah,
in the morning to wake up nice and refreshed, it
yeah.
really, again, I think probably I take it for granted again, but yeah, it's like something that makes me feel, oh, happy to start the day. But
Yeah,
then remembering what that must, or what it felt like not
mm,
to have that.
absolutely. Kind of like the deprivation, the impact, because, kind of thinking again about like what we said about the concentration, the memory, focus, struggling to remember, you know. And also, what can happen is people often don't realize that, and I notice this with a lot of clients, is that they don't realize that worry contributes to sleep a huge amount. Because often people will say, I wake up in the night at like 2 or 3 o'clock and I cannot get back to sleep again because I'm thinking. So what they're saying is, I'm worrying um,
Yeah.
about all of these different things, and then we can get into this kind of state of this hyper arousal that happens, where our mind is just racing. We've got these racing thoughts. Um, then we have this like anticipatory anxiety of, like you said earlier, what if I can't get to sleep? Or I don't want to go to sleep. I need to avoid bedtime now because it's not a nice time. So sometimes what I find helpful can be using rest rather than sleep. So I'm going to rest rather than going to sleep.
Mhm, mhm.
And sometimes take the pressure off a little bit of that kind of like, I have to sleep because I need to get up at this time in the morning or do this tomorrow.
That's it. And one of the that makes total sense because one of the things that so there were lots of techniques. So obviously I was practicing yoga. I started doing more of a nighttime routine before bed, and the
Yeah.
breathing exercises really helped me
Mm.
um, because I think that's what it is. It's the thoughts. So whether it's worry or sadness or
Yeah.
whatever that might be that's running through your mind.
Yeah.
uh, Breathing exercises really help you to just focus on your breath.
Absolutely.
Um, and it's also because one of the things that I think contributed, and again, it's like a knock-on effect to
Mm.
your overall health,
Mm.
because I definitely had issues with my digestive system
Mm.
at the time, not realizing these things are connected,
Yeah.
because sleep is a time where your body repairs, clears out,
Yeah.
does all the functions that it's not doing whilst you're awake, but
Yeah.
whilst you're asleep, this is the time for the body to repair, clear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's true.
Um,
Thinking about it in that sense of what impact is, what's happening in my body while I'm
it's
sleeping. And like you
mm,
said there, that restoration, isn't it? It's right.
yeah,
Needs to get rid of certain things, needs to kind of repair, the cells are repairing all of that as well. Um,
mm,
so important.
yeah, and I think it does again, it's that thing of once you're aware, I think that's half the battle. If
Yeah,
you're not realizing that that's what's going on,
yeah,
you don't think that that's something you necessarily have to fix first,
that's
but
true.
sleep, yeah.
That is very true, isn't it? Like, because it's the importance that might be placed upon it as well. As you were saying earlier, well, oh, I don't really need that much sleep. Well, actually, you might not at the moment, but you probably will do at some point. Um,
Mhm.
so thinking about what you need, and again, that might be dependent on people's lifestyle and all of that, as what they're doing and their work and all of that as well, plays a part, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Um, uh, another group of people who might find it difficult as well. I always think, because I used to do shifts many, many years ago,
Yeah.
and it always used to play havoc, not so much with my sleep, but my, eating. So,
Yeah.
the general or the best way really is to have a gap of when you've had your dinner or your evening meal before you go to sleep. But if you work shifts, that's a really difficult thing to work in, because if you're doing, I don't know, the night shift,
Mm.
you're going to get hungry. You're more or less going to have some kind of dinner,
Yeah.
and then you're going home, going to sleep to catch. It really messes everything up. Um,
Absolutely, because you've got
mm,
energy which you don't need at that time of night, but you need to eat as well. So it's quite a difficult situation, isn't it? It's how do you manage that? On shift, you're right with shift workers. Often, it's very hard for them to get a routine, isn't it? Mm.
balance, because
Mm.
you might be one week doing a certain shift, the
Yeah,
next week, and some people are doing different shifts every single
absolutely.
day, so
Yeah,
you're all over the place.
yeah,
Body clock is totally off.
yeah.
It must be a really hard thing to get back on track with.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I guess it's kind of looking at how do you manage that? Might it be things like preparing food or trying to get a break in where you can a little bit closer towards the end of the shift before you go home, or
Mm,
you're not eating really late, or how do you think about what your body needs and when it needs it? Because I
mhm.
guess that's going to be different for everybody as well, isn't it? Is
Yeah,
what we need and when we might need that.
yeah,
But absolutely, that energy created before bed by food, because we'll all like to snack sometimes, don't we? And you
right.
know,
Yeah,
about myself as when I say that.
yeah, I'm me.
Just snack before bed while you
Mm,
watch Netflix or you're reading a book, just have a little snack and like,
mm,
I've got energy now. Don't really
yeah,
need it at 10 o'clock at night, but I've got it.
exactly. That's exactly it. It's really funny, like and I think as you get older as well, you're when we're doing those things in our teens and our 20s,
Mm.
our metabolism works much, quicker and more efficiently
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah,
So you don't notice how those things will impact you. But if you're, I
yeah.
used to do that. I'm just laughing because I used to think, oh, it's bedtime. I'll take a packet of crisps,
Yeah.
some chocolate, go read a book, and then go to sleep. Like, oh, I can't even imagine doing that now for so many reasons. But yeah,
Well,
you body can cope with it a bit easier.
yeah, or think it like because I mean, today my plan is, popcorn and Netflix
Yeah,
this
exactly.
evening. So, I know if I'm doing it today, then
Mm,
it's thinking about how often you do that as well, isn't it? If you're doing it all the time, probably not helpful. So I guess it's like you said earlier, bringing it into your awareness, bringing it into your consciousness about what you're doing and the impact that that is actually having, on your sleep
mm.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Mm. And so with the idea I was thinking of, it's like changing. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, I don't want to change everything." And it's the idea of
Yeah,
changing all these things
yeah,
all at once.
yeah.
So an hour before bed, don't look at your phone, don't watch
Mhm.
television, don't, it sounds like punishment,
Yeah,
and it's, you know what I mean? You've been bad, so you better switch the telly off. But
that's
I think
true.
what's, do you know what I mean? It
Yeah,
sounds like a lot of
yeah.
stuff. If you're going to drink something, drink water, and then deprive
It's so
yourself.
funny. Sometimes I feel like, especially when I'm doing CBT, with clients and we're looking at the sleep pattern and I'm like, "Right, you're napping during the day. What are you napping for?" Because I really do like to have a laugh with clients sometimes, and I think that's such a good part of the relationship, is having a laugh and a joke with them. And they're like, "You can take my naps away," and I'm like, "Absolutely, I'm taking your naps away. No napping." And then they'll come back like, "I didn't nap. I'm
Oh,
tired."
but then it's a good night's sleep, right?
Yeah, I'm like, "Let's persevere with this. I'm still taking the naps away. You don't need them."
Mhm. No, totally, and it can make such a difference, yeah.
Absolutely. But I think with the changes though, like you said about changes, you don't wanna make all of the changes at once because like you said, you could drink a cup of coffee and you go to bed. If that's okay for you, you don't need to change it. You're only
Mm,
changing the things that are actually having an impact and are a problem. So, like when we talk about kind of like, environment, bright lights, not using your phone, not watching TV, anything stimulating,
mm.
it's reducing that or changing the time of doing that only if you're having a problem with your sleep. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
not,
Yeah.
then it's not a problem, so you don't need to change it.
Yeah, yeah. I remember as well, this was so some people I know, I still speak to a lot of people. It surprises me sometimes, with COVID. So a lot of
Mm,
people started working from home who had never done that.
yeah.
I was quite used to working from home,
Mm,
and sometimes what I'd do, so in a one-bedroom flat, we'd go
mm,
into the bedroom and work in there.
mm,
And I remember when I was studying more about sleep issues and the
Yeah.
problems I have, and looking into that for myself,
Mm.
the advice was, even if you're in a small space, like even if you've got a studio
Yeah.
apartment and you've got your laptop or your computer, have
Mm.
everything to do with work in one particular
Yeah.
corner. Definitely not around the bed,
Mm.
because try and keep the bed as the bedroom or the
Yeah.
bed sleeping space as a sleeping space.
Mm.
Try not to intermingle.
Yeah.
And then even if it means, if you haven't got much room, throwing a cloth
Mm.
over the computer or a blanket and
Yeah.
over anything to do with work, so when it's bedtime, you don't see it. You
Yeah,
don't
that's true.
to just kind of
Mm.
have those separate environments. So the bedroom is for
Yeah.
sleep,
Yeah.
the living room is for, you're relaxing, chilling out.
Yeah.
Kitchen, obviously, if you can try and separate those things, when
Yeah.
it comes to sleep, your body, your mind thinks about
Yeah.
just sleep. Yeah.
Absolutely, because you're drawing a distinction then, aren't you? You're drawing a boundary between,
Yeah,
right, that is the space that I'm working in, that is the space that I'm sleeping in. Um, that is very true.
yeah, yeah. And also, having the so I used to have a TV in my bedroom. I
Yeah.
haven't had that for years because,
Oh,
that would be the
okay.
thing. I was thinking that, yeah, let's watch telly until
Yeah.
you fall asleep, which it could be something you really love, and you're watching this like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
while you sleep. So
Mm.
yeah, those are things. Now I go, I think about it now. I think, God, it's a good thing because the bedroom is just, made and intended for sleep. But if you're struggling with sleep,
Yeah.
that's the environment you're trying to create.
That's
Yeah.
it, isn't it? And taking out the things like you said, like that are gonna kind of not be helpful. Even the temperature of a room or what's in a room or what isn't in a room, like if there's too much clutter in a room, that's not gonna maybe help. If it's too hot, or too cold, that's not gonna help. So there's so many factors that
Mm.
are gonna be important there. I think it's trying to find and you have to I'll often say to people that I work with, you've got to play around with it because
Yeah.
you need to see, for a good like week or two, not one day, not one night, and then come back to me and say that this isn't working.
Yeah, I know.
Please give it a go for at least a week.
Mm.
Let's see what actually happens. Even people that don't like reading, I'll say, well, okay, why don't you listen to
Yeah.
a gentle audiobook if you don't want to read a book, or listen to some music or something that's going to just help you, like visualize a calm, safe place in your mind while you use your breathing, but keep a sleep diary. So if you're keeping a sleep diary, you can look to see, and often we'll do that together. I'll ask them to bring it back. Can we look together and see what the difficulties are, so we can think about the small changes we might make one by one? And often there'll be some patterns or themes there within those sleep diaries.
Definitely, definitely. Especially, for some people, going for a run,
Mm.
an hour or so before bed
Yeah.
really works for them.
Mm.
But for a lot of people, well, some people as well,
Yeah.
um, running it's not a gentle kind of exercise. So it can be something that lifts you up and keeps you awake, like you're saying. You feel like full of energy. So probably,
Absolutely.
finding something that feels a bit more
Mm.
relaxing, say yoga
Yeah.
or stretching, some kind of stretching,
Yeah.
and like you say, sounds as well, because it could be just, I
Yeah.
like the sound of waterfalls. Some people like the sound of rain,
Yeah.
that can be quite relaxing.
Absolutely. There's so much stuff out there, isn't there? Like on YouTube or apps, like, that you can look at. And what you said about the exercise, it's really gently,
Mm.
again, it's different for everyone, not helpful because it is going to activate your nervous system, which also then is increasing your body temperature when you're exercising before bed. So if you're doing something intense, that's what's happening in your body. So I think, like you said, if you are going to do something, yoga or stretching or something really kind of calming,
Mm.
and I guess you can bring in a safe place. within that, can't you? A calm place. Your mind as well, maybe, um,
Mm,
while that's happening.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I suppose it's the idea, I love that, of same preparation
Mm.
and knowing, looking forward to sleep rather than it feeling like the dread that you're
Yeah,
building. Oh, I'm gonna have another sleepless night. Even the mindset of
of course.
a terrible night's sleep is
Yeah,
part of,
yeah.
becomes part of the issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so, because then you're caught again in that cycle, aren't you? You've got that thought of, "I'm going to have a terrible night's sleep." You start to then feel anxious. You then don't sleep well. You'll be tossing and turning, you'll be looking at the clock, you'll be checking your phone, you'll be doing all these things. So you've got that unhelpful vicious cycle, which
Mhm.
I guess at that point in time you're thinking, let's break it up. How do we view sleep? How can we view it as I'm resting, or I'm going to look forward to trying to get a helpful night's sleep, um, rather than putting pressure on myself, to sleep.
And that's it. It does become something where we're putting pressure on ourselves,
Yeah, of
and
course.
that in turn is just turning into more stress,
Yeah,
more
yeah,
anxiety. Mm.
definitely.
And also, so I was thinking as well about, um, I suppose it's part of that as well, the emotions that we have when something isn't going to plan, or, bedtime, I wanna go to sleep because I've got to get up for work in the morning. When we're
Yeah.
thinking about those things, then again, I suppose it's just being mindful, uh,
Mm, mm.
to change those emotions. Because, like you say, with the lack of sleep, you then go through your day
Yeah,
feeling a bit jittery, anxious. Maybe you're piling on the, you know, drowning in coffee or energy drinks to make up for it, and it's such a cycle
yeah,
that's just not helpful. It's
yeah,
breaking
yeah.
everything else down. Mm,
That's it, isn't it? Because you'll have that bias of, like you said, right, this is going wrong, or that's not happening. I need another coffee. I need definitely, and which then, I've got this many hours left till I go to sleep. So it all becomes quite a problem and a difficulty, doesn't it?
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely, and I suppose it's the awareness or the mindfulness
Mm.
of how we're going about this, how we're treating ourselves,
Yeah,
how we're the thought process
yeah.
behind, what's going on. And the
Mm.
diary, I think, as you mentioned, is key,
Yeah.
because it doesn't just, like, it could be it's a sleep diary, but then if you're putting in things like what time you ate, what did you eat, just those little notes, exercise, if you've got any, or if you overdid it, because
Yeah,
then sometimes if we're missing things, we
that's
try
right.
and make up for them.
Yeah.
And if you keep that diary, like saying, over a few weeks,
Mm.
months, you
Yeah,
definitely will see the patterns,
yeah,
and then you have your own clear idea of what's actually going on. Mm,
definitely, definitely. And then you can look at, right, what do I do with it now? Because as we said, then it will be in our awareness, won't it, of what the difficulties are. Um, and we're then able to, I guess, mindfully pay attention to that
see.
more. Mm.
And so what would you say would be some, like, tips, um,
Yeah.
for mindfulness, to incorporate mindfulness, but also things
Mm.
struggling with sleep? We've mentioned quite a few there, to be fair, but was there?
Yeah. So thinking about kind of what mindfulness is, if we're thinking about what it is, because sometimes people often think mindfulness is relaxation. It's not relaxation. Relaxation can be a byproduct of mindfulness, but mindfulness is about kind of becoming aware of what is happening in the present moment,
Mm,
without trying to pass judgments on what's happening. Because we often find ourselves, don't we, worrying about the future or ruminating about the past, which can lead to kind of these feelings of distress that we might experience. And I guess mindfulness can help us to attend to what's happening in the present moment. Um, because as human beings, our minds are going to wander. That's what our minds are designed to do, is to wander. So it's kind of like gently bringing it back to the present moment. And There is, you know, emergent kind of evidence to suggest, and I think I mentioned about brain scans that are being done and everything in a previous episode that we did. But regular practice of mindfulness can help with low mood and anxiety, you know, and can also help with kind of like physical health conditions like pain, chronic illness. Um, and when we're kind of becoming mindful, we're also becoming curious, aren't we, about what's
Mm,
occurring in the present moment. Let's have a look at, you know, what's actually happening, that curiosity there. Because we're on autopilot a lot of the time.
most
I
of the
mean,
time, yeah.
you know, how many times have we driven somewhere or got, you know, gone on a journey somewhere and you're like, how did I get here so quickly? Didn't realize I got here.
Because your mind is elsewhere and you're not
Yeah.
noticing. Yeah.
Completely. So kind of like in terms of like some tips perhaps to incorporate mindfulness, there
Mhm.
are a lot of apps out there. So, you know, there's audios, lots of audios on YouTube. There's a really good site called Balanced Minds.
Mhm.
Um, you've got a couple of apps called Calm, and Headspace. You've also got the Compassionate Mind Foundation, which has got some brilliant resources there as well on breathing and imagery and mindfulness. So you can use these things to help to kind of aid practice, or guided practice. But then also, if you're thinking about it in a on a day-to-day basis, it might just be starting to pay more attention to everyday things and activities that we might be doing. So it might be the most simple task, like when we get up in the morning and we're going to brush our teeth, you know, really paying attention to that, you know, get absorbing yourself in that activity almost, you know, immersing yourself in that activity. We're also thinking about kind of like one thing you can do every day that might be some mindful activity, um, for however long. It doesn't have to be very long, but just bringing your attention to one activity that you might do during the day that where you kind of being more mindful.
Yeah.
And sometimes we try to push our thoughts away as well, won't we? You know, so what can be helpful is to sometimes not attach a meaning to our thoughts. So you might imagine that your thoughts are like leaves on a stream and they're just passing by and you're just watching them pass by. You're not challenging them, you're not doing anything with them, you're not attaching a meaning, you're just watching them pass by and observing them. Um, so I guess there's lots of different things to perhaps try. There. It's just playing around to see what works.
Yeah, yeah, because one of the things, well, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I've tried meditation, that doesn't work for
Yeah.
me," or "What's supposed to happen in meditation?" Some people are
Mm,
just so comfortable with this idea of what it's supposed to be, how I'm supposed to feel, and the thing about it is, it's different for everybody. And the main thing is being able to, like you say, to
yeah.
take your focus inwards. Because, like you say, it's not
Yeah.
about trying to stop your thoughts. I mean,
Mm,
it's just about distancing yourself, like you say,
yeah.
not attaching to them,
Yeah.
um, and realizing that you can make changes with those.
Yeah.
The negative thought patterns, you can actually change those. And
Mm,
that's what meditation helps you to do. Pay attention to the
yeah.
inner narrative of what you're telling yourself. Mm,
It's true, isn't it? Because, you know, often the work that I do with a lot of like corporate clients would be that their jobs are really, really intense. So because of
mm,
the nature of their work, they won't have a lunch break or they won't because they're having to keep an eye on like figures. And if they miss it, they'll miss out on a lot of money or whatever it might be. So I can't say to them, take a half an hour lunch break because they can't do that.
mm,
So it's kind of like, how do we incorporate this into the time that you have, even if it's little mini nuggets of
mm.
moments that you can do to just break it down a little bit. How do we do that?
That's it. And I think that's the most, I think we mentioned that in other episodes, that
Yeah.
instead of thinking that you've got to overhaul your whole life, your whole
Yeah.
routine, and you can't do that,
Mm,
uh, take those small, tiny little steps,
that's
you know,
it.
like 5 minutes,
Yeah.
whatever, it doesn't have to be meditation, but stretch, meditation, what you're eating, how you're eating, you know.
That's it, isn't it? Because it might be a doing activity, exactly like you said. That might be eating mindfully, or having a cup of tea mindfully, or whatever it might be. That's because you're doing it anyway. So you could just gently bring the mindfulness into what you're doing there.
Yeah.
So would you like to end with a mindfulness exercise?
I really, really would.
Yeah.
I would, yeah, try and
Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to do um, for you today just a 3-minute breathing space. Okay, so this again is just kind of, gently bringing in some mindfulness here. Okay, so if you feel comfortable and okay to do so, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. If not, you don't have to. You can
Oh,
just gaze at a spot. Okay, so I'll bring your attention back to the room once we've ended the exercise. Okay, so to begin, just allow yourself to make any adjustments to your seated posture that may be necessary. Try to keep your back straight if you can, but comfortable. And the sit bones should be supported. And you can feel yourself rooted to the earth at the contact points where your body meets your chair and the floor. Now direct part of your attention to the soles of the feet and then to the flow of experience that unfolds in your mind. Just gently observing thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations. Just allow yourself to notice as much as you can what is presenting itself to you at this moment. And pay particular attention to those feelings, ideas, and sensations that may be unpleasant or upsetting. Rather than pushing these away, allow them to be just as they are. Take a moment and allow yourself to simply acknowledge the presence of these experiences, making space for whatever emerges and flows through your field of inner observation. Now, having allowed yourself to sit in the presence of this moment with whatever it brings, it's time to change your focus and attention towards a single object. Just gently observe your breathing, direct your attention to the movements of your body as you exhale and inhale. Take special notice of the bellows like movement of the abdomen as our body gently allows the air to move in and out, moment by moment. Take a minute to stay with the flow of breath Allow your attention to blend with the movement, breathing itself as best as you can. Next, bring your attention to a third step. Allow the scope of your awareness to widen, to gradually encompass the entire body. Bring your attention into the body as a whole. As you inhale, and sense the body gently expanding as you inhale. As you exhale, completely let go of that awareness. Just stay with this experience and allow yourself to make space within your body and mind as best as you can for whatever arrives. Next, begin to let go of this exercise by again directing part of your attention to the soles of your feet and to the top of your head, and part of your attention to everything in between. And just notice your body, your mind slowing down. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and gently bring your attention back to the room.
That was lovely.
How did that feel for you?
It felt so the first thing, your voice is very calming as well, so it really felt relaxing straight away. And the focus is drawn to, the breathing and what you're saying, and you kind of, I suppose it's almost like you're still very aware, because I didn't fall off my chair thinking, I hope I don't just fall asleep and start snoring and everything.
Not yet, anyway. Not
Yeah,
yet.
not long, but
Not long.
it felt so relaxing, and even just that. So how long was that? Sorry, 3 minutes.
So that was 3 minutes, yeah. I would have put in a little more spaces, but I was just conscious of obviously time.
Wow.
But I would have added a little bit more space in between that meditation.
Oh, I think the listeners are going to love that. I've recorded some meditations as well in the other podcast, Serenity Speaks. But it's different things for, I think if you've never meditated, or you've tried meditation and you feel like it hasn't worked, I think
Yeah,
that's a beautiful way to start, because it's such a little bite. But what's
yeah.
amazing about it is coming back out of that meditation felt like I've been there for ages. It didn't feel like 3 minutes. That's why I had
Yeah.
to double check.
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it, how we all like kind of experience it differently.
Mm,
And what works for us as well. Like sometimes I'll do a meditation like that in a group and people will struggle. So then I'll do an imagery one and then I can connect with the imagery because I can visualize it. I can see my calm place in my mind when I close my eyes. But I'm struggling with the breathing or I'm struck. So it's just so different for everyone. But I think it's just gently start with something, whatever it might be, um, and then build on it.
yeah, and that's perfect. I think 3 minutes, as I said, you'll come out of that feeling
Mm,
so relaxed, so chilled. That will definitely help with sleep.
yeah,
I If you listen to that just before you're ready to go to bed, just to get into
absolutely.
that place. Yeah, it's really lovely.
That's it. Is
Yeah,
gently slowing your body and your mind down, and like we said, just preparing for rest.
yeah, yeah. I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's bedtime now.
It's bedtime. It's
It's
snack
gonna go
time
to
now.
bed now.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
so
great. Thank you so much for having me again.
thank you. I love it. Honestly, I really do. I really feel like we tackle some great
Yeah,
topics that are really helpful for the listeners. So yeah, it's been amazing.
brilliant. Excellent. Look forward to next time.
Absolutely. You take care now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.